everyone, welcome back to our YouTube channel. This is me Vanshika, your host and news analyst, bringing you the latest updates with clear, sharp and deep analysis. A war in the Middle East can increase your fuel bills in India overnight. One OPEC meeting can raise inflation across the world, and a single blocked route can trigger the global panic. And one decision made in Washington can quietly make the petrol more expensive for billions of people, because petrol is not just a fuel, it is a part, it is a geopolitical part. This chart shows the scale of global oil, that the biggest economies are also the biggest energy consumers, which means oil is not just about transport, it is about industries, trade, factories and the entire economy. Most people think that petrol begins at the fuel stations, but petrol's journey actually starts from the deep underground. What comes out of the earth is a crude oil, a thick, dark fossil fuel formed over millions of years, and before it reaches your bike, your car, your airplane, it travels through one of the most complex supply chain on earth. This flowchart explains how the oil moves across the global system. From underground reserves to international markets to refineries to petrol pumps, and at every stage, someone adds cost. Oil companies, shipping firms, refineries, governments, retail dealers, which means the final petrol prices is actually the result of global economic chain reactions. This simplified chain shows one important reality. The crude oil cannot directly power the vehicles. It must first be refined, transported, distributed. At every single step, it adds the money, time and geopolitical risk. No single country completely controls the oil prices, but some countries influence them more than others, especially Saudi Arabia, Russia, the United States of America. Together, they shape the global oil supply and supply control prices. One of the most powerful groups in the energy world is OPEC, the organization of the petroleum exporting countries. When OPEC cuts the oil production, the global supply decreases, and when the supply falls, the prices automatically rises up. But oil markets are not purely logical, they are psychological. Sometimes prices increases not because the oil is missing, but because the traders fear the shortage. That means wars, sanctions, military tensions, pipeline attacks, shipping disruptions can instantly move the oil prices, even before the shortage happens. Most of the world's oil passes through the politically dangerous regions, especially one location, the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow sea route between the Iran and Oman. But this tiny corridor handles nearly 1/5 of the global petroleum trade, which means that even if the conflict happens there, the entire world panics. In recent years, the Middle East tensions have repeatedly shaken the oil market. The Russia-Ukraine war triggered one of the largest energy shocks in decades. The Red Sea shipping attacks disrupted the global trade routes, and the fear surrounding the Iran and the Strait of Hormuz continue to create the market volatility, because the oil market reacts not only to the supply but also to the fear. This graph shows that how the global crisis repeatedly shocks the oil prices. War increases the fear, pandemics destroys the demand, and geopolitical tensions create the uncertainty, and even the major disruptions sends the energy market into the chaos. Now comes one of the least understood part of the oil system, that is US dollars. Yes, you heard that right, it is US dollars. The oil is traded globally in dollars. This is called the Petrodollar system. That means countries like India must first buy a dollar before buying the oil. So when the dollar becomes stronger, India pays more rupees for the same crude oil, that even if the oil prices themselves remain unchanged. This flowchart explains how the currency affects the petrol prices. A stronger dollar makes the oil imports more expensive for India, and higher import costs eventually drives up the fuel prices for the consumers. India imports most of its crude oil, which makes the country highly vulnerable to global oil shocks. But crude oil itself is one of the most important part of the final petrol prices. A massive portion comes from the taxes. Both central and the state government earn major revenue from the fuel. This breakdown explains where your petrol money actually goes. The crude oil is only one part. Taxes from the massive share of the final price. The rest covers the refining, transportation and dealer operations. This bar chart visually highlights the biggest reality. Taxes are one of the largest components of the petrol prices in India, which is why the fuel often remains expensive even when the global crude prices fall. These taxes fund highways, railways, welfare schemes, infrastructure, subsidies, public services. Reducing the fuel taxes may temporarily reduce the prices, but it also reduces the government revenue. So the government faces a difficult trade-off, a cheap fuel or the fiscal stability. Petrol prices don't only affect the vehicles, they affect the entire economy because transportation powers agriculture, logistics, food delivery, e-commerce, airline, factories, public transport, manufacturing. So when the fuel becomes expensive, almost everything becomes expensive. This flowchart shows the hidden chain reaction of the fuel inflation because the higher fuel prices increases the transportation cost. Business then raise the product prices. Inflation prices, consumer spends less and economic growth slows down. Historically, fuel inflation has influenced elections, protests, public anger, government popularity because fuel prices affect daily life directly, which makes the petrol an emotional political issue, not just an economic number. There's another reason the cheap petrol may never last permanently because government now want to reduce the dependence on oil itself because oil dependency creates national vulnerability. Countries depend on imported energy becomes exposed to wars, sanctions, inflation shocks, currency crisis, geopolitical pressures, and that's why the nation worldwide are investing heavily on electronic vehicles, solar energy, renewable power, battery technology, public transportation, and energy security is now the geopolitical strategy. So, the next time the petrol prices rises, remember that number on the fuel station boards is connected to an enormous invisible system, a system involving oil producing nations, wars, shipping routes, financial markets, taxes, currencies, and global power struggles. And one OPEC decision, one military conflict, and one currency shocks can affect millions of ordinary people overnight because petrol prices are not controlled by one government. They are the result of a deeply interconnected global system. And that's why the fuel prices are actually a geopolitical story. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, do hit the like button and subscribe to our YouTube channel.